Welcome back to Words of Paradise. I'm your host, Leon Idol, and I'll be honest, I wanted some levity. I found a Mary Sue article. I haven't gone through it, but the title gripped me. It was Who Did It Better? Avatar, The Way of Water versus Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. And just knowing it's Mary Sue means it's going to be filled with so much dumb, woke stuff I thought could just be a giggle for us to go through together. So yeah, let's not waste any time. Let's go through this. The Mary Sue. You gotta love... For those of you that don't know, the Mary Sue is literally the wokest of woke when it comes to nerd reporting. They're block happy, suspend happy. They've blocked every account I've made, well, I guess all two of them, to try and just comment on their stuff when they post ridiculous shit. Like, I remember one time they blocked me for, they posted like a pro, plus size superheroes. I was talking about how dumb, specifically plus size female superheroes, by the way. I was talking about how dumb that was because, superheroes are meant to embody, like, the best of humanity, and being plus size 9 times out of 10 is not the best of humanity. Let's take a look at this. Who did it better? Avatar, The Way of Water versus Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. James Cameron hates Marvel. Understandably, as he should. Marvel kind of sucks nowadays. But is that because they do it better? If I had a nickel for every time a 2022 movie featured blue water people with indigenous connections and a special relationship with whales, I would have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. You literally stole that from Phineas and Ferb, and you're not even going to give credit?
Wow. If I had a nickel for every time I was doomed by a puppet, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
Like, yeah, right there. You straight up, you're going to steal this joke and then not even give credit? Like, oh my god, a TikToker must have written this article. Anyway, so between Avatar, The Way of Water and Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, which nickel is shinier, more original, and less racist? No, we're not even through the first paragraph and racism is already being brought up. This is why I love to hate the Mary Sue. Here's a comparison between 2 of the biggest indigenous blockbuster movies of the year to see who did what best. Spoilers for Avatar: Way of Water. Mind you, I haven't seen Avatar: The Way of Water, and I won't. I don't care, I'll be honest. But out the gate, female representation. Like, that's the first thing. We're talking about movies. We're not going to talk about cinematography, direction, music, production. No, we're going to jump right into female representation. Crime and Nitley. Alrighty. Despite James Cameron's claims to the contrary, one pregnant woman going to war does not make Avatar: The Way of Water more empowering than Captain Marvel. I mean, it definitely makes it... Oh, I was going to say makes it dumber, but I don't know if you can get dumber than Captain Marvel. Like, having a pregnant woman go into battle... It's just dumb. It's like, if that's how your culture is, like, let's say that the Na'vi, like, that's normal for them, that's antithetical to your culture continuing, because, I mean, you have a bunch of pregos going into battle having miscarriages, your species ain't going to move on for too much longer. So, I don't know if it's more empowering, but it's definitely absolutely ridiculous. If anything, I would argue this movie was a little less empowering than the first one. They massacred my girl Neytiri, making her a much more passive figure in this movie to a baffling degree. Despite her constantly telling Jake that they need to stand their ground and fight, he repeatedly tells her that running is the better option. Neytiri is forced to leave behind her forest, her whole tribe, and even her own mother to start over in a completely different ecosystem. Yet, unlike Jake and her children, we never got a scene of her struggling to adapt to the ways of the new tribe, despite the fact that she should probably have the most trouble, given that she spent her whole life in the forest and has never had to adapt like Jake has. This is a complaint I've heard from some individuals, is that Neytiri is just kind of an accessory for the first 2/3 of the movie, but then in the last third is a badass. I don't know or care, but by the same token, if she's not central to the plot, then we don't need it. Like, this is already a 3-hour movie. And it's a 3-hour movie that a lot of people are actually saying is really good. Like, they're talking about how much better it is than the first one. First one, you get, yeah, it's pretty, but it was a Pocahontas in space. This one I've heard is actually still a simple story, but mostly original, and just as, if not prettier. So, look, when you've got a 3.5-hour movie, or 3 hour and 10-minute movie, That's already really long, and not a drop of screen time should be wasted. So if it does its job and tells the story as is, then we don't need to see Neytiri moping about trying to figure out, how to live with this new tribe. It clearly didn't serve a purpose. There's a major focus on motherhood in this movie. Is there? Is there really? Because from everything I've heard, whether it be from people in like the fandom minutes, geeks and gamers, to the most left-leaning reviewers, to just the casual viewers, have said this is all about fatherhood. So maybe there is some motherhood stuff in this movie, I don't know, but I have not heard that. Everyone's talked about how it's about fatherhood, and frankly how refreshing it is to see that in Hollywood, since it's been a long time since we've seen it last. With Neytiri and Dr. Grace's avatar both having given birth in the time between the first movie and now, but Neytiri's role as a mother is sidelined in favor of Jake's role as a father. Oh no! Fatherhood in a movie! It's not like we haven't seen motherhood in a million other movies, but it's fine. Let's just bitch a little. It's cool. During the film's climax, Jake tells her to stop mourning the death of their eldest son. Well, I guess there's a spoiler. Jake tells her to stop mourning the death of their eldest son in order to save their daughters. Cameron himself seems to think that a lot of female superheroes can't be empowering because they aren't mothers. Like James, women don't need to have children to have protective or heroic instinct. First of all, I've never seen anyone claim that. I've also never seen James Cameron claim that. I mean, if I remember right, he threw a fit about the, empowering Captain Marvel or whatever, because they just weren't good characters. They were planks of wood. Like, there's nothing empowering about them, especially about them being female. It was all surface level and superficial. So it doesn't help that the younger female characters like Kiri, Took, and Sierra are constantly getting captured by the bad guys to the point the youngest child complains about it. They're fucking children. I would expect them to get captured by the bad guys. They're kids. In a lot of ways, this film feels like one step forward, two steps back. Compare this to Black Panther, a movie that's basically entirely led by women. The film is largely about Shuri, Ramonda, Okoye, and Nakia as they struggle through their grief after the loss of T'Challa. Shuri's main arc is about the divide between her scientific mind and her spirituality, between what she knows to be fact and what she wants to believe. Nakia is also a character who has become a mother. What, buddy? You have a lot to say? Huh? Got a lot to say about this? Nakia is also a character who has become a mother in the time between movies, but her motherhood does not define her whole character. Okoye is a warrior bound by duty and terrified of both change and failure, not realizing that both can give her space to grow. The biggest problem with this movie is the fate of Queen Ramonda, who dies in a way that feels like, oh my god, fridging? You're gonna bring up fridging. An all-female, effectively all-female superhero movie, and you've got to have some gravitas to a film. Sometimes characters die. If you have an all-female or mostly all-female film, the odds of the characters dying are going to be more likely that it's female because you've got a larger percentage of the female cast. That's just math. It's not fridging just because she's a fucking woman. Oh my god. Since her death is used to motivate Shuri. Look, death is a motivator. I mean, in so many stories, death is a motivator. Just because death motivates you, or motivates a character, doesn't mean it's fridging. A frequent problem from Marvel, a major female character has died in every movie since Infinity War, but even Ramonda is not defined by motherhood. She is also a queen, a politician, and a character who has power but still struggles to protect those she loves. Indigenous representation. You guys know that both Wakanda and by extension the Wakandans and the Na'vi are fictional, right? Like, we're not over here judging Aladdin, the fictional land of Agrabah and its representation. Like, these aren't real. I want to make it clear that both representations of fictional indigenous people are exactly that, fictional. Okay, good. I'll give you some credit, Mary Sue. Good job. You understand the difference between reality and fiction, at least this time. I can't really discredit either of them as bad representation because they're ultimately not representing a real-world culture. However, they are also borrowing from indigenous cultures and commenting on colonialism as a whole. As such, their indigenous connections are worth analyzing. Alright, Black Panther does not focus on colonialism, or if it does it in such a backhanded, awful way that it makes Wakandans look like the bad guys. Like, oh, look, it's Civil War. The Avengers can't go in to other countries and start wars because that's an abuse of power. Look at Black Panther. Wakandans can go into other countries and start wars. Woo! Wakanda the good guys. Like, yeah, you're sending mixed messages, and if your message is about colonialism, they're doing a piss poor job of it. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever changed the formerly white Atlanteans to Central American peoples. Yeah, and frankly, as a comic book fan, this annoyed the shit out of me. Not because they're, oh, I don't want to see Latinos in my movies. No, just because it's a dumb, unnecessary change that feels like you're doing it for woke diversity points. Like, there was no reason to make that change. I know they claimed that they changed it from Atlantis so that people wouldn't confuse it with Aquaman, but no, that's to save face. You were hoping to score some cred. It's fine, whatever. Just acknowledge it for what it is. Deriving inspiration from Mayan people of Yucatan Peninsula, their story is thoroughly rooted in colonialism, with the people fleeing underwater to escape smallpox and enslavement by the Spanish. Namor was literally given his name by Spanish conquistadors and priests who called him a child without love for punishing the colonizers. The actors playing Atlanteans went above and beyond to try and portray the Mayan culture accurately, even learning the language. I don't think they learned the language. They probably learned how to pronounce their lines accurately. But I'm not going to walk up to whoever played Namor and be like, yo, tell me how to find Taco Bell in ancient Mayan, and him be able to fucking tell me. Tenoch has been especially vocal about what his casting in the film meant to him and people like him. The film also shows how the American military intelligence complex is a continuation of those same colonial forces, not wanting anyone but themselves to have access to vibranium. I love film criticism. I love kicking back, watching the movie, then giving my thoughts on it. Shameless plug, watch my Sonic Prime Season 1 review, please. But there comes a time when just your criticism goes too far. It is still just a fucking movie. I doubt that, writer BC16 was chilling at Marvel Studios like, how do we make sure that we've enforced the roots of colonialism into our modern products as to further our narrative and make sure the children know that white men bad. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sure some of that absolutely goes on at Marvel, but not to the extent of criticizing the military-industrial complex. It's still a fucking Disney movie. Comparatively, Avatar still feels very much like a movie from 2008. Jake is still the main character, and his kids and Natiri's kids are almost all played by white actors. Oh no? White actor, bad. They're not even white. I mean, they're CGI, so they're blue. The skin color doesn't matter. And so what if it feels like a movie from 2008? Remember when movies were good? I Am Legend was good, and it came out in 2007. That starred Will Smith. He's black. There's... Just because a movie feels like 2008, that makes it sound like you're saying movies now are inherently better when they're not. In fact, I would wager that I could make an argument as to why movies now are objectively worse than they have been in previous decades. So, yeah, Mary Sue, you gotta do better than this. I mean, you're the Mary Sue. You're supposed to be infallible because you're a Mary Sue. What is this shit? This whitewashing also extends to the other Na'vi characters, and Kate Winslet playing the wife of the chief, who is played by a New Zealander. Again, I mean, Kate Winslet's an award-winning actress. She was in fucking Titanic. What do you want? Also, the way Spider was worked into this world feels very culturally appropriative. Cultural appropriation is not real. Moving on. The boy, a human, literally paints himself blue and does his hair in dreadlocks to make himself more like the Na'vi. While they do lampshade this, it's mostly in the form of jokes between the kids. I mean, if anything, that feels like the opposite of what you want to call cultural appropriation. He's a boy, a human boy. Again, I haven't seen the show, but from what this is making it sound like, who's adopted by the Na'vi and wants to fit in. That should be, an internal struggle. George of the Jungle, Tarzan. I mean, they did it. Remember in George of the Jungle, they called Brendan Fraser's character, George, the white ape, and then they find out the white ape's a man, that he's George of the Jungle. But, was he culturally appropriating the, culture of the gorilla people he lived with by moving around and acting and talking like a fucking gorilla? Or was Tarzan doing the same thing, being raised by gorillas? No, it's this character was raised in this environment. It's the environment he feels closest to, and he wants to represent that. So if anything, you could call it fictional cultural representation, but even then, that's just stupid sounding. Villains. Okay, so we know villain in Avatar is white man bad, so I assume. I mean, it's a modern film. I could be wrong. So I immediately assume they're going to say that Avatar has the better villain. Namor is an incredible villain, not only for how much of a threat he is, but also for how he challenges Shuri's worldview. Because unlike her brother, a part of Shuri is so angry with the world that she does want to lash out and burn it all. Shuri and Namor understand each other's desire to protect their people at all costs, and that's ultimately the reason they mutually end the fighting, in an attempt to live in peace. I mean, that's pretty much how Atlantis works in the comics. I don't really see that as anything groundbreaking. People forget, Namor's been around comic book wise since like the 30s. He's one of the oldest comic book members in the Marvel Pantheon. We've seen this story a million fucking times, so yeah, this is just nothing new. Avatar, meanwhile, literally brings back Colonel Quaritch, the villain who died at the end of the first movie, only this time he's in an Avatar body. You'd think a guy as racist as him would take issue with now technically being part of the race he saw as inferior that literally killed him, but he just shrugs it off. I mean, wouldn't you call that progress? Isn't he technically being progressive in shrugging that off? You would think character growth like that would actually be something that you would love. Or do you just really want to stick to your white man as racist and bad narrative that you're willing to overlook your own principles? There's an interesting dynamic between him and his surprised son, Spider, who was raised among the Na'vi and holds his knowledge over his father's head. But the relationship between the two is undercut by Spider continually helping his father and ultimately saving his life, despite knowing that his father is hurting the Na'vi. I mean, again, that seems like a character conflict, which is good. Like, oh, you've got this boy that was raised by the Na'vi. Oh, he finds out that his biological father is alive, and now you've got internal conflict. Like, that sounds like good storytelling off the cuff without you putting your fucking racist rhetoric in here. The morality of the story is just as black and white as the first one, only instead of killing trees for mining, they're killing mother whales and their calves, all in an effort to obtain the litter of liquid that stops human aging because it sells for millions back home. All that talk of saving humanity from the man-made destruction of Earth in the first movie, and as it turns out, they're actually there to make the lives of the rich better. Okay, I mean, yeah, economic stuff in a James Cameron movie. Shocker! This is a brutally honest assessment of late-stage capitalism and our attempts to undo climate change through new technologies, but ultimately isn't expanded upon in this movie. It doesn't have to be. Not every movie is or should be a window on how to make the real world better. Sometimes shit's just movies. Like, wanna know what movie I love? It's Christmas time. I love the Santa Claus. Actually, my favorite is Santa Claus 2. Wanna know the premise of that movie? Santa needs to find a wife. You don't have to look into it any further than that. Santa gotta get laid and get hitched or else he can't be Santa no more. Alright, it's simple. Now let's run with the Tim Allen hijinks. Like, let's pick another Christmas movie that's dumb and bad that I actually don't like, but I get why a lot of people do. Home Alone. Premise is simple. Kid gets forgotten. Robbers try and break in. He staves them off with, comic book-esque style inventions and ingenuity. It's just a fun fucking story. There's no meaning to it, no deep hidden message you need to analyze. It's not going to go down in the annals of storytelling history like, Troy, like the Odyssey, or like Shakespeare. It's just fun to watch a kid fucking traumatize robbers with slingshots. Like, it's Dennis the Menace, but for 90s kids. So, shut the fuck up, Mary Sue. World building. I have to give credit where credit's due. The world of Avatar is still incredibly stunning and creative. Seeing the differences between the forest people and the coral people from a biological and cultural perspective is fascinating. The talking whales are a bit of a surprise, mostly because we're not used to seeing subtitles for whale vocalizations, but given the connections with the trees before, it's not much of a stretch to imagine the Na'vi learning to communicate with other intelligent life forms. The one place where it falls flat is the implication that all Na'vi know the same language, as if there wouldn't be any communication issues due to different dialects or languages. I mean, again, it doesn't fall flat. It's a movie. Yes, you could add a 10-minute scene where they, struggle to learn this other region's language, and then do a time jump where you've learned they've culturally assimilated. But the movie's already 3 hours and 10 minutes. I get trying to find plot holes for critique purposes, but this one's too much even for me. Like, even Nostalgia Critic wouldn't go that low. While the world building for Wakanda Forever's Tolakan is... Right, Tolakan. You mean Atlantis? Is incredible as both an underwater nation and a remnant of the Maya, there are parts of it that feel inconsistent. Wakanda worries about going to war with another nation that has access to vibranium, but the previous movies showed they had a system to neutralize the effects of the precious metal. So why not use that? We see that Tolakan is lit by a false sun, likely powered by or made from raw vibranium, but otherwise, we see very little of how vibranium affects their culture or technology. It doesn't help that some parts, like the warriors' heightened healing factors or the fact that some Tolakan are blue and some are brown, is never explained. Okay, why do you want that to be explained? Aren't you the website that talks about how, like, you know, pointing out race stuff and accentuating race stuff is bad, and like you're all for diversity and all colors matter and we shouldn't talk about it because we should just accept it as the norm? So shouldn't we just accept as the norm that some are blue and some are brown? Why do you want an explanation? I don't need an explanation in Predator as to why the colors of the cast members are the colors they are. Arnold Schwarzenegger's Austrian. There's 2 or 3 black characters. There's a Native American character, a couple Americans. I'm just here for the romp. Like, I'm not a racist. I don't care how the races intermingle and work together. So, what you saying, Mary Sue? Conclusion. While Pandora and the Na'vi are inspired by the creations of many people, their story was written and put to screen by a white man. And there it is. Can't you just make the same argument about Black Panther? I mean, Kevin Feige is the head of Marvel, and he's a white man. Like, I know Kevin Feige wasn't sitting there making Black Panther 2, but let's be honest, he's got some pretty big weight to throw around in that project. The idea that, oh no, person's skin color means they do bad job, that is what's racist. You are part of the problem, Mary Sue. Like, man, I remember, this is anecdotally, I remember when I found out that Full Metal Alchemist was written by a woman. I was shocked. Not because I don't think women can't be mangakas or women can't write or anything like that. Just the way she wrote Brotherly Love seemed something that was so intrinsically masculine that I assumed it was a male writer and he, you know, maybe had a brother or you know, some brother-like figure. And it was awesome and eye-opening. I also learned this like 6 or 7 years ago and have never once questioned it since, because your race or your gender or whatever don't impact your ability to write a good fucking story. The YouTuber Sideways made an excellent video that shows that, for as expansive as the world building of Avatar was, it was also limited by James Cameron's vision of how he wanted this planet to look and sound. It's a fictional fucking planet. You're criticizing a man who has made so many of the highest grossing films of all time, and even not only the highest grossing ones, but most memorable. I mean, the Terminator films, first 2, Titanic, obviously Avatar, Aliens. Like, the dude is arguably the most prolific man in Hollywood, aside from maybe Steven Spielberg. Is he my favorite? No, honestly, not even close, but you can't argue with his resume. So, I'm sorry, I don't really want to give a lot of credence as to what some dumbass news internet article like this has to say about a man whose legacy will last long after all of us reading this, watching this, whatnot, are dead and gone. I mean, I'm sure, I haven't checked, but I'm sure Cameron's films, several of them, are in the National History Film Registry or whatever it's called. So yeah, saying that it's limited by James Cameron's vision of how he wanted to make this planet look and sound, it's a fictional planet. If Homeboy wanted to have, you know, green sky and blue grass, he could do that. He'd be stealing from Akira Toriyama, but he could do that. Of course it's his vision, and there's nothing wrong with it. We all talked about how cinematically gorgeous these films are, so clearly he did something right. They had to scrap the first version of the soundtrack because it sounded too alien. Irony at its finest. Meanwhile, fans are clamoring for more Namor and Tolakan and the indigenous representation in the MCU, which we sadly may not get due to copyright issues. No one's clamoring for more MCU, aside from a few stragglers who just can't acknowledge the fact that, honestly, the MCU has been going downhill for the better part of half a decade. You're trying to speak/write things into existence that just aren't going to happen. We can all see through this bullshit. No one wants this. You're trying to say people want this so that other individuals like me who read this all of a sudden feel bad or guilty when we think, oh, well, I don't want this. Am I the odd one out? Of course, everyone's allowed to have their own preferences. It doesn't seem like you want us to have our own preferences, but okay. Ultimately, the difference between the two franchises is that Avatar feels more like the same white savior narratives that we've seen in 100 other movies. While for all the MCU's flaws, the Black Panther movies always give us something new. No, they don't! They don't give us anything new. They're literally... In the comments, please, give me 5 new things either Black Panther film introduced. I will happily retract my statement and acknowledge you're correct if you can give me 5 new things the Black Panther films introduced. Which movie was a better representation? Which film was better overall? Comment below. Yeah. Don't comment below. Don't go to this website. Don't give them the traffic and the ad dollars and whatnot. I know I did it, but I do it so you don't have to. Instead, don't watch either film, or if you're gonna watch one of the two, watch Avatar just so it can financially beat the shit out of the MCU. Both probably aren't that good. I haven't seen either. I don't care about over-reliance on CGI. I mean, look, we're at a point where CGI, it looks gorgeous in all big-name films. It looks good in Star Wars, looks good in the MCU, looks good in Avatar. Like, even all CGI movies, like the Minions movies, the upcoming Mario film. Yeah, CGI just looks good now. We're not back in the Star Wars prequel trilogy days, which in my opinion, story-wise, hold up better than the vast majority of movies we're getting now, even if the effects are dated. I will take bad effects with a good story over the opposite every day of the week. Especially if the good effects are CGI and being made in a fucking computer. Give me decent practical effects with a decent story, and I will take that over either of the other two extremes any day. And frankly, you guys should too. We need more practicality in Hollywood. We need less political woke activism in Hollywood, and we need less articles like the one from the Mary Sue. And then again, maybe we need more so we have more stuff to point and laugh at. I don't know. Either way, that's all I've got. Please like, comment, subscribe. I'm really trying to grow this channel, so it would mean the world to me if you subscribed. And follow me on Twitter @BoltTheWord. And until then, this has been Words of Paradise.